in the earlier workshop. I'm always pleased when I don't run everybody off, you know. So welcome back if you're back, and welcome for the first time if you're listening and viewing for the first time with us today. Hope you're enjoying the conference. It sounds like Miss Terry and Miss Teresa, as always, have put together a really excellent learning experience for you guys, and I'm honored to be on the lineup once again. So welcome, and we're going to get going. My name is Jeremy Elledge. I am a licensed clinical social worker. Miss Teresa, we have different people. Does it look like? Can you tell, or same people?
Looks like a lot of them are the same.
Okay, all right. Well, then I'll keep my introductions brief because I told you guys who I am earlier. But if there's any new folks, I head up New View Healing Solutions, and we partner with the Evolution Foundation. I'm also a member of the Evolution Foundation, doing great things in our state coalition building and putting together awesome events for our communities throughout. And so we're a provider of continuing education. And we do that for mental health professionals, our fellow mental health professionals. I'm a social worker. Hello to my fellow social workers. We also provide continuing education to case managers, LPCs, and LMFTs. So if any of you guys are of those disciplines today, we are an approved provider. Shoot us an email and you will get a 1-hour certificate of continuing education for today's training if you need it. But we started this organization because, like I mentioned to most of you earlier, Oklahoma is #1 in the nation for ACEs, #1 for childhood trauma, #1 for family trauma in the United States of America. So we started this organization because we wanted to do something about that. I'm proud to be one of a limited number of trauma specialists in Oklahoma trained by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And we appreciate folks who support us for getting their continuing education. And we want to make training that's real and that really helps people help people. And we want to make it affordable too, because a lot of training is expensive and it's not even that good. So we want to, do the best that we can to contribute to our field. And we can do something about our injured state, but we want to help every safe adult know about the injuries of trauma and what they can do about that. So one of the things we do want to have you guys help us plug is the fact that we do free training for all police departments and free training for all schools. I know I talked with you, Miss Terry. We hopefully do something for some of the schools out that way. We don't ask $1 from any of our systems of care that need care. So we're just there to make a difference. And so give us a shout or let folks know if you find what we're talking about interesting, meaningful, or helpful. If you want a copy of today's presentation, shoot us an email, info@newviewhealingsolutions.org, and Will usually puts it in the subject line or the comments or the chat, whatever. And so I am vision impaired. And so I am not going to read you my PowerPoint presentation today. And my good friend and bro, Will, fellow social worker, soon to be licensed and member of the team, is my eyeballs today and helping me with the tech. And so I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate Evolution Foundation. Appreciate my DMH friends and family. As you guys know, some of you, I'm a DMHer. And so, but anyway, I appreciate your something. And this is our something. If I depressed you a little bit earlier today about generational trauma and what it's doing to our state and to our people and to our future, then this part is going to hopefully answer some of the questions on what we do about that. And so anyway, we're going to roll with it. And so shoot us an email if you need anything from us, a PowerPoint, a certificate, or anything else. The first slide is about emotional intelligence. But the name of today's presentation is called Healing Injured Parenting. And so that's, I believe, one of the most important answers that we have to the problems of generational trauma in our state. And so we're not going to be able to heal every parenting relationship. And indeed, some are not ever going to be safe or healthy or appropriate parenting figures. And so obviously, I want to only work with parents that are going to be safe and not put their kids at in any further risk for abuse, neglect, or harm. But I started this presentation because of a program that I'm starting in Cleveland County, and it's something that I hope to make available in some other counties as well, because I used to teach parenting classes for about a decade at CCFI here in Norman. Some of you guys may be familiar, Center for Children and Families, and it had some pretty decent curriculum. But one of the things that I think is missing is helping parents address their own injuries and what that's done to their parenting instincts, what that's done to their norms, what that's done for their forms of expression and coping, for what feelings look and sound like when we're talking with kids. So Will's going to help me check the chat board today. So if you have questions or comments, please share those. And I will try to be attentive and responding to those. But first, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. Does anyone have thoughts on what it means to be emotionally intelligent? It's a term I hear increasingly in the world today. What does emotional intelligence mean? You see my coffee anywhere, man?
Is it being like emotionally aware?
Absolutely, emotionally aware. I like her answer. Who other answers? Okay, well, we don't have anyone else that's got answers. So me and that lady are the only ones that are emotionally aware today. No, I'm just kidding. But emotional intelligence is something that when I'm working with kids and with families, people ain't broke, and I'm not trying to fix them. I said ain't, I should. People aren't broken, and I am not a fixer. In fact, most people, I really believe that they need good information and encouragement. And so, people are the experts of their own life. And if we can give them the tools to navigate this situation and to better understand their own experience, their own brain and their body and their injuries, their emotional capacities, then we really have empowered true healing. The medical model says, people are jacked up and they're sick and they're, and they're kind of these, I don't know, pathetic wretches that come to these fancy experts, and we're going to fix them with our enlightenment and our tools and our fancy knowledge and everything. But really, the injury model is a more appropriate model for healing. And the injury model says that anybody can be injured. And if we understand how to navigate our injuries, we can get better. So anyway, one obviously empowers the survivor, and the other empowers the system that makes lots of money to not help anyone get any better. But anyway, not always. That's cynical. So anyway, emotional intelligence, though, when I'm talking with kids and with families, I say, if we're working in treatment, if we're doing something like treatment, it's an important, serious process. And if you're building a house, you can't start with the roof. It just falls down on the ground. You got to make a firm foundation. And terms like emotional intelligence are going to mean by firm foundation. This is a concept and an understanding and a language that I want us to all operate from in our treatment process. So emotional intelligence, you're right, it's about emotional awareness. What we know, emotions are these feelings, these capacities that we have in our brain. So now, no feeling is right or wrong, scientifically speaking. We're born with every one of those capacities, and even really unpleasant emotions, we're born with those abilities to get mad, to get sad, to get scared, to get embarrassed, to get, we have all these capacities, so we must need them all for something. So there's no such thing as bad or wrong emotions. But we're going to be more intelligent about our emotions and about those capacities. And for me, it's about understanding our brain a little bit better, because as I watch our world become increasingly injured and hypervigilant, as I see people, injured people reacting to injured people reacting to injured people, I'm wondering, where did it all end? And I'm thinking, emotional intelligence is something we're all needing a lot right now in our world, because there's so many goofballs out there that doesn't really know how to use their brain. People have really great brains that they're not using. So anyway, I want to perform a brief experiment with you guys right now. And so no response is required. So this will not open you up to any embarrassment or vulnerability. But what this is doing, I'm going to ask you to think about your emotional state right now, your feelings, what you'd feel if you said your feelings with words, how you're feeling right now. And you don't have to say it. In fact, if there's, very many people on there, we'd probably be on here for a while getting feelings check-ins. And so that's okay. But when you're doing that, you're actually using your cerebral cortex. That's the top part of your brain. And you're using it to look down inside of your brain into your limbic system, and you're seeing what it's doing. And so in that process, you can gain some awareness. Now, evidence shows if I know how I feel and why I feel that way, my trigger or my feeling or my need, then I'm less likely to react or let my feelings out in ways that I don't want my feelings to come out, which we all do sometimes, or to hold them in and suppress feelings in a way that might make me sick and that will almost certainly fail to address my need. And so emotional intelligence is about understand how our brain works. I'm not going to break down, intense neuroscience with you, because I'm not a neurologist. I'm a social worker. Shout out to my fellow social workers. But one of the things, I am fascinated by the brain, and as we understand it, we become conscious of it. And so a lot of people feel like they're just along for the ride with whatever their brain does, however they react in the situation. That's just how they felt. And a lot of people don't even recognize their feelings until they've already been reacted or acted upon or suppressed in a way that the need has gone on by. I'm going to silence my phone because it's dinging at me. Hopefully it's not Teresa saying, "Hey, I can't hear you." No. So it's about understanding our brain and our body. But let's think about our brain as far as two parts: cortex, limbic system. Smart brain, feelings brain. And so those two are two very separate, distinct structures and functions in our brain. And so our prefrontal cerebral cortex, that houses all of our really complex intellectual capacities, memory and thinking and planning and problem solving. That's where our rational and logic takes place. And so, and in fact, human beings, we have the biggest cerebral cortex pound for pound. We have 16 billion neurons in our cerebral cortex. That's a big old brain. And pound for pound, it's the biggest in the universe that we know of. Now, we know that elephants, apes, whales have bigger brains, but their cerebral cortex and their massive body size requires that they spend so much of their time feeding and consuming calories constantly in order to support their massive size. Now, we have big brains, fairly little bodies, and so we have the ability to think about thinking. Think about that. You think about thinking. So when you guys were thinking about, how you would put your feelings into words, you became more aware of your own emotional state, your own emotional capacity, and you became less reactive to it. A lot of people react to their feelings, and what emotional intelligence allows us to do is to slow a reaction down to a decision. And so we want to understand our different feelings and what we have feelings for, because no feelings are bad or wrong, but some feelings get associated or encoded with dysfunctional data. I was telling you guys earlier, our young brain is constantly sucking up data, and it doesn't have a goalie or a defender. It lets in all the data. And I call those cognitive cookies. They're going into the cognitive cookie jar. And so later on, when kids are looking at their adults and their caregivers and the people around, and they're soaking up data for what emotions look like and sound like. And so, and hopefully they're only learning from Mr. Rogers and all really wholesome, healthy examples of what emotions look and sound like. But again, our kids are, being pounded with detrimental familiarities. Our emotional capacities are here to help us. They're to help us navigate life. And a lot of people are learning to hurt themselves with their own natural responses. And so to be destructive to themselves and their family and to fail to address their own needs. And so emotional intelligence helps us address that. But we're going to, know how we feel and why we feel that way. And I have put emotions into 4 different categories in this book that I'm writing. And so, and I'll just tell you about the categories really quickly, because in each session, I'm going to ask a person what their feelings are, and then what their goals are. And we're going to look at these capacities in these categories to say, what's this emotion trying to tell me? What need is trying to be identified in my physiological emotional response? And one of the things that we do as we get into later on in cognitive behavioral therapy, we also see that a lot of people have adapted to dysfunction. And we have to help people learn to challenge that, because I'm not going to just tell people to think more positively. I don't think that's particularly helpful at all. But one of the things is we can help people learn how to use their brain in a more productive way. When we challenge thoughts that don't benefit us, we can have better access to our cerebral cortex. When we help people cope and calm down and calm down the stressed system and the limbic reactivity, we have greater access to our intellect. Because, stressed people, emotional people aren't able to draw on their own intelligence. And so this is really about mastering our own brain and not just being along for the ride, drug along with what our brain has learned to do, because a lot of us didn't always have the greatest examples of what to do. So, one of the things that I want to talk with you guys about today is our capacity to change our brain. That's something I'm really psyched about, is we have the ability to influence the ongoing development of our brain based on what we do. But anyway, the 4 categories real quick that I'll tell you, there's anger and sadness. I call those negative motivators. Our brain is trying to reject or change or defend or problem solve an outcome that we don't like. Anger and sadness. And so we're attempting to make the situation better if we can. And then, a lot of times what we'd have to do is, if it's a loss, we may have to accept that loss. But the next category is fear and stress responses. Fear and stress responses help us react quickly and instinctively to a threat or perceived threat. But if we have to use that too often, then it harms us. Again, our brain is use dependent. And so the more our nervous system is activated for fear, it's like a muscle, and it becomes overdeveloped and it becomes prone to spasm, and it wants to work on its own when not even activated. And so that's when we see some of the lingering impacts of trauma or chronic stress. And I think that's the next slide, isn't it?
Injuries of trauma.
Huh, there you go. So injuries of trauma and chronic. And our brain functions with electrical impulses. It was I'm reminded, I'll just tell you guys this little story Robert told me. Robert is a member of the evolution team, a dear friend and brother and mentor and all that. He was telling me about an experience with severely mentally ill patients in an institution. And he said that a little lady walked up to him and, it was clearly very mentally ill, and she looked up at it and said, "God is electricity." And he, didn't pay it much thought at the time, but, our heart functions with, it beats because of electricity. Our brain, it functions. We can literally light up a light bulb based with our own brain. So anyway, so our emotional capacities, our electrical impulses that indicate our emotions, we can get too much of those. We can get too much of our own physical or emotional pain response, and it leaves a lasting impression on our brain and on our body, and that is measurable. And I think that's really important for us to understand. Now, if somebody's black and blue and broken boned, we can tell, if they're in a clinic being treated for, assault or something else, we can tell. But sometimes those injuries heal on the outside. A lot of times we can't tell how somebody's been injured. Again, trauma changes our brain, heart, nervous system in measurable ways. Told you guys that earlier today. It alters our physical development, our pubic development, our social, emotional, and physical development. So it's a real injury, and people don't walk around with brain scanners and heart monitors on. So if the bruises and the outside stuff has healed, people still may be very, very injured. And that's important for us to understand in this line of work, because injured people hurt your feelings, make you mad, live and do ways, express and cope in ways that we wouldn't agree with sometimes. And so we have to understand the injuries of trauma and chronic stress. And I told you guys, chronic stress is similar, has a very similar impact to our brain and body and our injuries, but it is less noticeable, because chronic stress can be having a really stressful job or having a really stressful family, or, just not having anything that specifically beat you up or hurt you or run you over or assaulted you, but stressed you out enough. And it's a bit more insidious in those impacts, because we try to give consideration to the person that we know has been through a lot. But the person who's chronically stressed, we might not know that they're injured at all. And then they might be crabby, or they may have maladaptive coping mechanisms. They may eat or drink or, express in ways that we don't agree with. And so we might judge and punish somebody for being injured. And so that's one of the things. Now, I work with a lot of injured families, as you guys probably do as well. And one of the things that I want to, I don't want to shame, parents for being injured, because of course they don't want to hear what I have to say. So I think part of it is it's helping people understand their own injuries first. I had a parent tell me, well, I was raised that way and I'm just fine. Well, part of me wanted to say, well, fine is debatable at best, sir. But no, but the reality was he had a lot of resilience. And I dare say, I told him, sir, I think you are fine. I said, but a lot of your strength, probably came in spite of those injuries, not because of them, and so. So anyway, helping people understand injuries is really key to changing injured patterns of behavior, because injured people do injured things. Injured behaviors make us more injured. It hurts us, it hurts our families, it hurts our communities. Our communities are hurting right now. So emotional intelligence and understanding, trauma informing our society really is the answer. I've heard, trauma-informed language, and it's kind of trendy, but it needs to be more than trendy. We need to understand if we're going to heal. What's next, Will?
Healing your brain, healing your thinking.
Okay. So I got this method that I've developed over the years. I've had just really blessed opportunities for learning. And so but over time, I got to learn from some really neat experts. And, I was fresh out of college. So they're like, here, you're going to go learn from Bruce Perry. I was like, okay, who's that? Cool. And I got to spend 12 weeks learning from that guy. And I got to learn from some of the founders of the TFCBT model, and Joe Benamati and Sandy Bloom from the Sanctuary and START models. It was all learning's new learning when you're fresh out of the gates, but I didn't know that I was a part of something, stepping into something big. Anyway, but over time, as I'm listening to this modality and this concept and this theory and this, this research, it started to kind of come together in my mind, the puzzle pieces, some of them have kind of become more clear, but identify, challenge, and change is something that I want to teach. And so I want to first identify our injuries. If people, back in history class, you had a timeline. Remember your timelines, and you'd plot all these things on the timeline. And so we have our own timeline. And I think it's important for us to go back in that timeline and see where we got injured. When we were little, or when we were in adolescence, when we got injured. And then I think it's important for us to identify where we started to develop negative maladaptive coping. One of the reasons we have those ACEs outcomes is because injured kids that didn't have the understanding or complexity or safety to really heal, they developed maladaptive coping, because injured people do injured things. And when you're hurting bad, you're not walking around thinking, gosh, I sure am hurting bad. What's the best and most rational and healthy way to relieve myself of this pain? No, when you're in pain, you want out however you can get out of it. And so again, a lot of kids developed maladaptive coping mechanisms. And what slide are we on?
Healing your brain.
Oh yeah, healing your brain. So yeah, he's got to keep me on track a little bit. So
We have a half hour.
half hour. Okay, that's great. That's great. So we identify the injuries, the maladaptive coping, and the impacts that it's had on us. The impacts that it's had on our parenting. What's the last couple of bullets on that one, Will?
Forgiving ourselves for being injured.
Oh yeah. So one of the things injured people do injured things. If I look at the ACEs study and look at somebody's ACEs score without ever meeting the individual, I'd have a 90% accuracy predictor of what kind of problems they would develop in adolescence and adulthood without even ever knowing the person. Injured people do injured things, and it is a phenomenon. It is not an excuse. Our prisons are full of injured little boys and injured little girls that didn't know how to quit being injured. And of course, there's a system waiting to chop them up. A profitable prison system that likes to lock people up. America locks up more of its citizens than anywhere, any nation in the world. And Oklahoma is leading the forefront of that. And it's not because we got so many bad people, it's because we got so many injured people doing so many injured things. So anyway, we've got to help people forgive themselves for being injured in childhood, for growing up injured, for parenting injured, because they were absolutely drawing from their own data that they were provided with, because we all learn from someone who learned from someone who learned from someone. And so one of the things that I want to do in family therapy is I want to really empower the parenting role, and I want to help them recognize if they're injured as a parent and forgive themselves for being injured. And when I'm working with kids, I do psychological education because I want them to know these are the normal symptoms of trauma. You're not bad, you're not weak, you're not wrong. I know the system and the punishments and the judgments, it all stigmatizes us a lot. But, when I first thought about mental illness before I was a professional, I thought about the severe cases that you'd see in an institution. And I don't make light of that. It's tragic. But I didn't know that normal people could be mentally ill if they were hurt bad enough. I didn't know that if you got hurt bad enough and then you were, struggled with, feeling like doing anything you wanted or needed to do. Or if you got so stressed out that it was hard for you to think. Or focus, you were mentally ill in those moments. You were diagnosable. And to defeat the stigma, just understand we've all, the pandemic taught us we all have mental health. Not everyone addresses it. But there's a diagnosis in there for people who don't like to use public toilets, especially like really gross ones at gas stations. That's diagnosable? Are you kidding me? I mean, so that's laughable to me. But the point is everybody's diagnosable, and trauma is at the root of a lot of diagnosis. And a lot of people don't think about it when it's depression or when it's anxiety. When the word trauma is not in the diagnosis, well, a lot of times PTSD was initially the DX, but they at some point no longer met criteria for post-traumatic stress. So we forget about those injuries. And so again, we want to help people forgive themselves. And why do you guys think it's important that we forgive ourselves for being injured? Why do you think that's important? Is it important? And you can chat it in or you can comment. I have thoughts on why I feel like it's absolutely imperative. So no comments. So I'm going to say, well, I think recovery from trauma, depression, anxiety, mental health struggles, addiction struggles, generational trauma is hard. It's hard. This is often one of the biggest challenges that people will ever face. And if you feel like crap, if you're ashamed of yourself, if the world has taught you that you're bad and you just bought into it, a lot of us injured kids, we got in trouble a lot and we're told we're bad. And if you buy into it, if you believe it, you accept that you have a lesser value or that you're destined for bad things. If you accept that, then you're doomed. The worst thing you can do is hurt the way a person feels about themselves and their hope for the future. And so we've got to help people forgive themselves for doing exactly what injured people do, not to excuse it and say, all right, we'll just go on and keep, slapping people around and doing drugs and alcohol and doing unhealthy things to yourself and to your family because you're injured. It's not an excuse, but it's an understanding. And people want to forgive themselves. I had to go to a juvenile detention center when I was a kid, and they, talked about how I was going to go to an adult facility and stuff like that. A lot of us injured kids, we were wanting to climb out of that dumpster, but we felt when you feel low, you do low. They told me I was a bad kid. All right, I'm a bad kid then. All right, let's do bad, And so what we help, we teach kids how to feel about themselves, and we can, families look to us. It's weird how many grown-ups will look up to you, like people your own age will look up to you because you're in the clinical role. And so, but you can guide those people to some improved self-esteem also. And one of the things, the presentation that I was talking about earlier, improving outcomes means families healing together. I'm so tired of kids being treated like they're the one that's the problem, as if they can create the environment that everyone is struggling in. So anyway, I got more thoughts on that, but what's next, Will? Questions, comments, as always, we'll try to check in with those. How we change. And so one of the things when I talk about ICC, I told you the first couple of the letters, identify. We want to identify injuries and then injured patterns of thinking and behavior, injured norms, injured instincts. If we've learned any dysfunctional norms, we've all been affected by racism. We don't always want to recognize that. It doesn't mean we're racist, but we've all been affected by it. And I think it's important for us to examine and look for our blind spots so we cannot perpetuate any further marginalization. But when it comes to changing our brain, we become injured first by trauma and chronic stress, but then we also become injured by our own injured behaviors. The maladaptive coping, the drugs, the alcohol, the excessive outlets that cause us to neglect our other needs. And so it's those injured behaviors that make us more physically, emotionally, socially injured. And so if we can help people forgive themselves for doing injured and then start to insert new behaviors, what we do is we teach people new skills. We teach people new skills, and I drill and I rehearse those skills. And some people think, well, I don't need a coping skill right now. I feel good today. Well, yeah, today's a good day to do it. You don't wait till there's a fire to do a fire drill, because why? You can't think. When your stress indicators, when your emotional, response is strong in your brain, you don't have as much access to your intellect, to your decision making, to your best emotional capacities. So anyway, I'm going to teach people some new skills, and we're going to drill, because we hope to God we never need a tornado or a fire drill, or God forbid a shooter drill. We hope to never need those things, and most of us made it through our lives without ever needing one. My heart goes out to you if you didn't, if you had to go through a fire or a tornado or one of those other things. But see, those things are still rare enough that we don't have to consider them part of our everyday lives. Your people skills will be a part of your everyday life. People are going to stress you out, tick you off. And so it's going to be really, really important that we prepare people because I didn't mention before, one of the symptoms of trauma is hypervigilance, hypersensitivity to sounds, to stimulation, to things that are happening to us and around us. And so if we don't help people understand their own hypervigilance and then do something about it, then they're going to be reacting. Anxiety turns to agitation, turns to anger really quickly. But anyway, as we insert new skills, as we repeat those new skills, because we can't help what data went into our young brain. We can't help it. It was not of our choosing. But the great thing about our brain is there's lots of space left in there. And now with consciousness, I choose the data that goes into my brain. And I'm going to put new skills, new information for new skills into my brain, and then I'm going to practice them. And the neat thing is, the old habits, if you ever smoked or drank or, hit or did things that were unhealthy when you were injured, old instincts can creep back up. Smokers will tell you they every now and then, even if they quit 20 years ago, they might crave a cigarette every now and then. Sorry if I'm triggering anyone. But as we use new skills for coping, we give ourselves new neural pathways. We put the new data in our brain and we choose to use that data over and over and over again. And again, that forges new development in our brain. And that's development of our choosing. I didn't choose to be injured as a kid, but I choose to be well. I choose the development that takes place in my brain now. And that's power, folks. And that's power that we want to give to the injured family. And so anyway, I get kind of pumped up about this stuff because I see people getting better. I'm always really excited to begin a new treatment process with an injured family. And I have to be careful about that, because as social workers, as mental health professionals, case managers, helping professionals, people don't come to us for good news. So it's like, all right, great to see you. I'm so glad to meet another injured person. That's not what I'm saying, but I like to see people get better. And we have to get excited and get people pumped up about their own treatment, about their own capacity for change. Anyway, did I cover that one, Will?
Okay.
Did I?
Yeah.
He said, okay.
Teaching kids with observations and words, it sounds like you feel blank.
Oh, yeah. Tell me the last 3 bullets.
Modeling important skills for coping, expression, new ways of affecting.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're going to model new skills because how we change our family, I got a lot of kids who've not been taught good coping skills. The do as I say, not as I do. And so parents need to cope too. If you don't, they won't. And so it models important skills, and it's an important way to understand that coping is power. When you can change how you feel, you can literally, affect change within your own brain, within your own body, within your own mood. And it's not a change that anyone had to give to you. It's something that you gave to yourself. And so I feel like that's power. One of the things that's really important, this cognitive behavioral therapy stuff, I didn't understand for a long time. My very first therapy patient was a little old lady, and she would talk as long as you let her, and then she always felt better after she was done, and I didn't understand why. She said, "Oh, thank you. I feel so much better." I said, "You're welcome." But I didn't understand. But when our emotional, response and our electrical neurochemical response is strong in the brain, talking is one way that's proven to provide some relief and perspective. Because when you remember an experience, you don't remember it in words. You typically will remember it in audio and visual files in your brain, data files. And when you have to put those data into words, you actually transfer the data, and you are actually kind of watching your own story roll down the conveyor belt. You are literally kind of learning from data that's within your own brain. If you tell somebody about an experience that you've had, and you've never, told anyone about it before, or maybe you've only told that story a time or two, as you tell it, you're realizing things about your own experience. Data that you possessed, you're still becoming aware of. And so it teaches us, we learn from our own story. And again, when kids having strong feelings, again, we don't feel in words. We feel in electrical impulses. But we need words to help understand them, because words are from the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex helps us plan for our emotions. And so anyway, so when kids are mad, it sounds like you feel, so the kids are learning by observation and exposure, so we're using words to say our feelings and to talk about our experiences and to connect. Most traumatic injuries are human injuries, and I feel like human injuries require human solutions. So what's next?
Next is healing the lifestyle, the ingredients in the recipe.
Yeah.
About 17 minutes left.
17 minutes. Okay. Well, one of the things, as we're laying that foundation for families, I really want to do a lot of psychological education. I told you emotional intelligence is important. The injuries of trauma are important. Understanding our physical and emotional needs are imperative. And a part of understanding our physical and emotional needs is understanding that lifestyle is key. I mean, so key. There's a lot of people that don't eat any healthy food, don't hardly drink any water. People that don't get any exercise, that don't have any pattern or regulation of sleep. And they wonder why they feel like crap. And so one of the things, I'm a professional, and you're a professional, many of you. And so we're qualified to make some pretty hard recommendations, and we should in certain instances. If people don't mind the basics of self-care, basic nutrition and hydration, basic levels of exercise, basic sleep, as well as recreation and healthy fun, healthy human connections. If we're not doing those things, we're supposed to feel bad. Our body is telling on us. Our feelings are crying out for those needs. And so it's really, really important. We don't have to be perfect, but promoting healthy nourishment and hydration is key. Sleep, obviously, there's things that we can do to help ourselves. We can give ourselves the required amount of time at least. And cutting ourselves short of sleep is really, really something. People that say, I get 6 or 6.5 hours of sleep, 7 hours. If you need 7 to 8 hours of sleep, if you cut off an hour of the last cycle of sleep, which is often the deepest level of sleep, then you're often cutting off 40, 50, or 60% of the deepest level of sleep that you need. And so it's really important. I told you guys before about that. And exercise, one of the things, we work at desks, we sit down a lot. And so exercise is increasingly important in the inactive sedentary lifestyles of modern times, and so food is energy, and stress, developed in ancient man to help us fight or flight, when something was stressful. Now, daily stress isn't really, hopefully, going to require us to fight something or run away. But our body is calling on us, is producing cortisol and adrenaline. So if we don't do something with that, it's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt our digestion. It's going to cause depression and fatigue. So it's really going to be important that we use our body like it's for. We're not meant to sit around all the time like we do. Our body requires an energy equivalent to fight or flight. And if you've got post-traumatic stress, you absolutely require maybe a little more exercise than the average person, I dare say, because you got food energy and you got daily life stress, for, fight or flight that you can't fight or flight from. And then you've got stress that's post to a trauma. So I prescribe, as a mental health professional, exercise is part of your medicine. It's absolutely part of your medicine. It burns off additional cortisol and adrenaline that makes you feel anxious. And it boosts chemicals that make you feel good and happy and relaxed. Things that people take medications for, because those are more profitable than telling people to get off their butt and do something for themselves. And so, but I, not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. We all can do better with our self-care. And, as real busy, productive people who want to save the world, I think we can forget to build in some time for joy. Because I know we got to be productive all the time, but being unproductive sometimes will replenish and make us more productive when it's time to get back to it. And like I said, we're supposed to, my mentor teaches that we got 2 jobs in life: to play and to learn, to get it done and have some fun. And so that's my philosophy. So anyway, that's self-care and healing the lifestyle. We really do need to help understand depression, anxiety, physical, social, and emotional health problems spike when we don't take care of ourselves. And so, when you can get people pumped up about these things, I've had people decide on their own they didn't need medication as much because now they're giving their brain and body what it needs. And again, it's so empowering to give people the tools and they use them and then they feel better and they achieve that for themselves. Pretty cool. What's next?
So next is communicating for healthy outcomes.
Okay, I'll be quick on this one. One of the things as we're teaching families how to heal is, communication is up to 85% nonverbal, and people don't know how to talk with one another. Communication is one of those pre-logic norms. People are not walking around thinking, what is the best and most effective way to get my point across and to not hurt anyone's feelings? No, people don't do that. People just react and think and whatever comes to mind, no filter, And so what we've got to do is help people understand some of the basics. Very intelligent people have studied communication, what does work, what doesn't work. We need to help people identify the barriers and the blockers, things that absolutely break communication down, hurt our feelings, make us feel defensive, make us feel scared, activate our nervous system, and give us less ability to think, reason, or respond. Shouting at people, again, even if you're safe, if someone shouts, and you're safe in your rational brain, your limbic system, your stress system response spikes, and then all of a sudden, even if you're safe, you can't access your intelligence, you can't process information. So we want to help people quit yelling at each other. And so that is going to flex the nervous system too often and create more anxious kids and families. We're going to, identify, another couple of those barriers or blockers are things like critical or blaming statements. Up to 85% of communication is nonverbal. So we've really got to think about how we look and how we sound and be very calculated. This goes for families and parents. This goes for professionals because people with hypervigilant symptoms, they're going to be extra reactive. So we're going to really need to guard how we look and how we sound. And everybody else sees your face, more than you see your face. So guard against resting, what face, and how that can affect a hypervigilant population. So I stuck in there on the next slide, the iMessage formula. This kid told me, he said, iMessages, that's when your mom gives you a message with her eyes. I said, yeah, I've received a few of those messages, but this is the iMessage formula where we're saying me feel blank when what happens because of what happens and how it affects me. So what we've got to do is help people speak in calm and neutral tones, because if we're speaking in nasty or judgmental or negative tones, then the brain is reacting a split second emotionally before the information is even being processed. So being neutral in our tone and saying, I feel blank when this thing happens because of blank and how it affects me. Instead of saying, well, you did this, why did you? I feel frustrated when people borrow my things without asking, because then I don't always know where they are when I need them. As opposed to, well, why do you always move my stuff? Now I can't find it. Again, he's going to say, oh yeah, well, what about the time when you did the thing? And then we're doing this and we're not hearing each other. Communication, people think positive communication is about only positive things, but positive communication is most important when there is a concern or a conflict, when we really need to hear one another. Because, and families, one of the things that I want to really get across is, I have a whole presentation on communication, but what I want to really get across is, do you believe the people in your house love you, like you, respect you, care about you, or hate your guts, wish you were dead? What do you think? Because if you believe that no one in your family is really out to get you, that y'all tick each other off sometimes, then that's good. We're giving this the benefit of the doubt. Let's understand that sometimes we get on each other's nerves or affect each other in ways that we don't always mean to. And let's approach each other that way. And so I want to approach Will and say, I feel this way, and I'm hopefully pointing it out in a way that I didn't realize. I didn't think about that, man. I'll make sure I let you know next time, or whatever. So what's next?
Next is parenting to meet needs.
8 minutes, parenting to meet needs. Tell me about this one.
Facilitate your parents' interaction.
Oh, yeah.
with students.
Okay, so our job as parents, I look at, there's all kinds of different, parenting styles and dynamics, pardon me, that I've heard of in different journals and studies and different things. But I look at two different kinds, in my opinion, the facilitator and the authoritarian, because kids are little. I'm big. I could put them in that place and make them be there if I want them to be. But I want to sometimes lead them to the path of discovery. I don't want to, I'm bigger, so I can make them do it. But the thing is, the facilitator parent facilitates understanding and learning why things are important to be as they are, as opposed to the authoritarian parent is that, because I said so kind of parent. And, we don't need to explain and justify ourselves on everything to kids, but learning is important. Learning is important. And, a lot of times the authoritarian, the rule is based, you get people to do it or else, because there's going to be a bad thing that happens to you. And it's based a lot of times on the mood of the parent. So what we want to do is we want to present choices, natural consequences, and we want to do that when it's, when it's safe. I told them not to stick the fork in the, I told the toddler not to play in the road. No, obviously we've got to provide appropriate, safe supervision. Kids require structure. One of the things I'm seeing in a lot of facilities, residential care facilities, staff sitting back at the table reading a comic book or doing a crossword or doing their notes or whatever, and injured kids are left to just interact with one another, and we're wondering why they get in trouble. Injured kids require facilitation, structure. We can't just sit them in a room and expect them injured kids not to be injured with one another. So we've got to structure their activities. What's the last couple of bullets on this one?
Stating calm limits, a time for request and time for direction.
Yeah.
Descriptive phrase.
Oh, yeah.
Between stern and scary.
Okay, yeah. So, stating calm limits. These are, kind of parenting 101 things that I want to teach more in this parenting class. But there's a difference between stern and scary. I think that's really important. And so one of the things that I like to do is have a family discussion. Let's decide if you guys are not happy with the way things are going, let's make new rules. Let's see what everybody thinks the rule ought to be regarding curfew or homework or talking back or doing chores or whatever the problem is. And kids, what do you think the rule ought to be on that? All right, well, what do you think the consequence ought to be for that? Okay, so you'd be choosing that consequence? Okay, all right. Because I think I'm talking about the next slide now, aren't I?
Real human needs.
No, never mind. So anyway, but like I said, I want to take parents out of the bad guy equation. Kids think we're just trying to spoil their fun sometimes. Our job as adults is to teach kids cause and effect. When I do good things, make good choices, better life goes better and safer. And when I make bad choices, the outcome is not as good. We want them to do that and learn responsible decision making as opposed to don't tick me off. We want them to learn something other than don't make me the parent mad. Because of course, many of us were not always parented based on what our human developmental need was in that moment. A lot of times it was based on how strong our parents' emotion was or their stress or their mood or whatever else. So what's next, Will? 4 minutes.
Real human needs. Safety, food, shelter.
Okay, so thinking about real human needs, we all got them, but we, on the bottom of the Maslow's pyramid, food, shelter, and clothing, provisional things. It's important that, young and old people will have more needs. There's more vulnerability there. And so what's the third one, Will?
Emotional needs for love, attention, value, acceptance.
Yeah, so without love, attention, value, and acceptance, we go off into the world injured and we don't even know it. We have unmet needs that can be preyed upon by society. There's a lot of people, that will grab the gangs, the problematic peer groups, people that, want to do bad things with kids and to kids, prey on them so much easier because kids are going around looking for somebody to care and to pay attention to them. And a lot of, gangs and dysfunctional relationships in many ways are meeting, needs for people in very dysfunctional ways, but it comes at a cost. And so kids need lots of ability to move and play. We need to understand kids' development, because a lot of kids are called hyper when they're supposed to move around and jump around and play. That's what they're supposed to be doing to develop their body. We want to medicate that out of them, And so, what's the last bullet on there?
Kids requiring structured freedom protection from inexperience.
Disengaged parenting. I just want to say, in many ways, I see the cat food commercial on there. It says Sheba, let the mom lay there while the kid's bleeding. You guys seen that commercial? Kid says, "Mom, I'm bleeding. Band-Aid's in the cupboard." Well, I butchered that, but she goes, "Get two." She doesn't want to get up because she's got her cat, and that's a cute little cat food commercial or whatever. But it's become almost trendy and funny or humorous to be disengaged and off doing our own parenting thing. And one of the things I will say with the technology age, in the technology age, smartphones hit our brains all at different times. Most of us had smartphones and our brains were already grown. A lot of kids are becoming, are being really retarded in their development. I'm not calling kids retarded, but they are being retarded in their social emotional development, because now that kids have the technology to just inundate themselves with, parents are doing the same, and a lot of them are very disengaged with one another. So anyway, one of the things that we really have to do is work on the parenting environment. Are we on that last slide yet?
No.
Okay.
Passive parenting, active harm, and we got like 1 minute left.
Okay, so let me go to the last slide. One of the things that I want to do is I want to empower the parenting role, but I want to prescribe family therapy as an essential and an imperative part of the child's recovery. Again, they kick kids out at the curb and they tell them, you go in there and you talk to your therapist and you get better. You get better. And really, if we don't focus on the environmental factors that caused a child to struggle, then we're probably not going to be as effective. So I want to, again, align with parents. I want to form a real partnership with them whenever possible. But I want to help them see that I got 1 hour a week with your kid. How many hours you got? I've known them since they were 14. How long you known them? Again, your connection, your influence is so important. And so I want to help them recognize what they can do to help their kids get better, because when we all work on it together, when we work on our communication, when we work on our coping, then we actually are going to have an ability to see families heal together. So I guess I should stop. I got a little bit rushed there in the end, and I apologize. I always put a little bit more in the presentation than I have time for. And so I welcome your questions, your comments, your feedback. Let us know if you would like a copy of the presentation or if you would like a certificate. And I will leave it open to feedback.
Awesome.
Or questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to unmute, or you can drop them in the chat.
We'll probably at some point do a little bit longer version of this, because when I develop one of these, I always want to put so much stuff in there. But
Well, it looks like we've got a quiet group.
Okay.
Except my dogs. I don't see any questions or comments. So with that, if you guys want the copy of the PowerPoint, you can email info@newviewhealingsolutions.org. I just want to thank you guys for joining us for this session. Remind you that you have a 30-minute break, and then your next session will start at 1:30. At the end of today, probably by the end of the week, there's going to be a survey sent out, and that survey will have about 10 questions for you to answer and kind of guide and direct us as we move forward in planning other events. So I would encourage you to take just a couple of minutes and fill that out. If you fill out the survey, then we will send you a gift card for our thanks for you taking the time to do that. So again, keep your eye open for the survey. Since we don't have any questions, and I just want to tell Jeremy, thank you again. And like I said, his email is in the chat, so grab that if you need it. And you guys have a great afternoon, and we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you.